Well, apparently, none of you saw your shadow this morning, because you're all here. Or if you saw your shadow, you weren't frightened by it, and crawled back into your burrow or your bed. It is Groundhog Day. It's also the Feast of the Presentation. It's also known as Candlemas, because it was on this day that the church would bring candles that they were going to be using in church, but all the parishioners would bring the candles that they were going to use for the rest of the year, and they would bless them on this day. So when we were in Scotland and I was enrolled at university, the fall semester was called Michaelmas, and the spring semester was called Candlemas. And so that name's been around for a long time. But on this day, Mary and Joseph bring Jesus to the temple. And it says that they are there for their rite of purification. And what is happening is that after, according to the law, according to Leviticus, after a woman has given birth to a child, if it's a male child, she will be ceremonially or ritually unclean for a period of 7 days, and then there will be a period of 33 days of blood purification, for a total of 40. Now, if it were a girl, she would be ceremonially unclean for 14 days, and the blood purification would be 66 days. And so 80 days where she was not allowed to touch anything that was holy, or if anybody touched her or came in contact with her, would be ritually impure. Now, some have suggested that this seems a bit unfair. One of the readings of Leviticus on this, though, is that because male children were privileged, it's quite possible that after the birth of a female child, there would be some pressure to produce another child rather quickly. And so there was actually double the wait time, so to speak. So it's kind of like pregnancy leave. If you have a male child, you get 6 weeks off. Female child, you get 12 weeks off. And this is a way in which justice was taken care of in the Old Testament. Anyway, that's not at play today. What is at play is on the 8th day after Jesus was born, he was circumcised and named. And then on the 40th day, he was brought to the temple where Mary offered the sacrifice for her purification, 2 turtle doves. And also, they were dedicating Jesus to the Lord. Because all of the firstborn of Israel, whether it was the firstborn of livestock or whether it was the firstborn of human beings, were dedicated to God because God had claimed them. As he said, I took you out of Egypt, and the last thing that I did was to kill the firstborn of all of Egypt, but I passed over you. And so you're firstborn. Everything that first opens the womb, whether it's a human being or an animal, is dedicated to me. Now, if it was an animal, it was brought to the temple to be sacrificed. But of course, human beings weren't to be sacrificed. And so they were redeemed. They were brought to the temple, and instead of being sacrificed, a payment was made on their behalf. So Jesus, 40 days after he was born, which is February 2nd, if you're counting, is dedicated to God. And it didn't go unnoticed. Just as God let slip to the shepherds that his son had been born, so also God let slip to 2 elderly people, Simeon and Anna, that the Messiah that they had been waiting for has suddenly come into his temple. Simeon is said to have been waiting for the consolation of Israel. Anna, when she discovers this child, begins to proclaim everybody about this child who is longing for the redemption of Jerusalem. in 63 BC that Pompey came into Jerusalem, having defeated the Israelite army and took over the temple, desecrating it and establishing Roman occupation. And so I expect Simeon, although we don't know his name, and certainly Anna was alive the last time Israel was independent. So they are both looking for the time when God will finally set his people free. But what Simeon says is kind of interesting, because he sees in this Jesus not just Israel's Messiah, but the world's Savior, because this child is going to be a light for the Gentiles as well as glory for Israel. And so Simeon sees that God's vision is for all of creation to be redeemed, to be restored, to be reconciled. And he takes Jesus in his arm and proclaims all of this, and then he blesses Jesus, and then notice what he says as a blessing to Mary. This child is destined for the falling and the rising of many in Israel, and to be a sign that will be opposed, so that the inner thoughts of many will be revealed. How would you like that as a blessing over your life? Mary came to offer the sacrifice for her purification. But Simeon talks about a purification that is going to go on in the nation of Israel. A purification where some who are high will be brought low, and some who are low will be brought high. A purification in which the thoughts of every person will be revealed, so that they can be cleansed, so that they can be purified. We read in Malachi today that there's a time coming when the Levites are going to be purified. The Levites were, of course, the priests who performed all the offerings and sacrifices. And in Malachi's day, they become corrupt. And so Malachi says that the Lord is going to come suddenly into his temple, and he is going to be like a refining fire. And he will purify the descendants of Levi and refine them like gold and silver until they present offerings to the Lord in righteousness. It's kind of a scary image. But it's helpful to keep in mind that the only things that are worth refining are things that are inherently valuable. You don't refine base elements. You refine precious things like gold and silver. And so if God is refining something with fire, he is refining something that is already valuable, but has some impurities in it. And so a fire to refine, the process of purification, is actually to take something that is valuable and make it even more valuable by making it even more of what it truly is. So with God's people, they are valuable, so valuable that they are worth refining and purifying. I will purify the Levites so that they will present offerings to me in righteousness. And I think here God is not so concerned with just the offerings of bulls and lambs. Because we know from other prophets like Micah that the offerings that God really desires, the offerings and sacrifices that are most precious to God, are not the rams and the goats, but when his people take care of the widows and the orphans. As Micah says, what does your God desire of you? But to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. impurities have come into our lives that make it difficult for us to live out that vocation. And wouldn't we long for God to come into our lives, to shine the light in the dark recesses of our hearts, to take his fire and purify our thoughts so that we might present offerings in righteousness and justice to God, that we might genuinely do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with God. I think this is what Simeon sees in Jesus. That Jesus will be one who will reveal the inner hearts, the inner thoughts of people, but not to condemn, but to purify. To make us more of who we really are. For we were created as human beings to do justice, to love kindness, and walk humbly with God. But sometimes, when God shines his light into our hearts, and we see the darkness and the shadows that are cast there, we are tempted, like the groundhog, in the brightness of the day, to retreat into the burrow, to hide from those things that are revealed because we feel a sense of shame and guilt, and we fear judgment. But the light that God brings into our life is intended to reveal those things that make us less than what he has created us to be. And then he brings the fire of the Holy Spirit into our lives to purify us. Not so that we will be acceptable, because we already are acceptable. We are already greatly valued. But so that we can be more of what God has created us to be. How many times are you confronted with a situation where you walk away saying, I wish I had had it in me to be more loving, or more patient, or more kind. I wish in this situation my mind hadn't been filled with judgments, with prejudices. I wish my unconscious biases wouldn't keep getting in my way. Because what I really want is to do justice. I really want to love kindness. I really want to walk humbly with God. I really want to walk humbly with God's people. I really want to love God with all my heart, with all my soul, with all my mind, with all my strength. I really do want to love my neighbor as myself. I really do want to bless those who persecute me. Sometimes I just don't find it in me to do so. So what God calls us to, I think, is to come into the light. No matter what shadows get cast, but to stay in the light until our eyes grow accustomed to the light. I think God invites us to submit to the refining fire of the Holy Spirit, so that we might, like the burning bush of Moses, be fully on fire, yet not consumed. To be fully who we are, people of love and mercy and justice and humility, shining throughout the world with the flame of God's love and light. It's a bright and clear day, and you chose to be here, in the light, in God's presence.